All right, so this is with my flashes set up that I showed in the very first video. I have two 60-inch umbrellas set up. I'm going to come from this direction so you can kind of see. Clothing is here. Typically what I try to do is point, just so you can put it in reference, kind of the nose of this umbrella to the shoulder, and the nose of this umbrella to the shoulder. 45 degrees angle in. If you notice, like, they are really close to one another. Everything's very tight. A lot of the videos that I've seen, you girls have the umbrella is back way too far. It's the inverse law of light. The closer an object, the light source is, the closer and larger a light source is, the softer, the prettier the light will be. This is why when you, if I was to take the umbrella off of these and just use a bare bulb flash, this flash, that's a really, really, really small light source. And that's a really small light source. When you have pop-up flash on your camera, why pictures with just a pop-up flash usually look quote unquote flashy, it's that inverse light source. It gives a much harder shadows for your pictures. So what these umbrellas do, the 60-inch and the 60-inch, it makes your light source much bigger, much softer. That's why I think the company says they prefer natural light, because if you've got a large window versus a small flash, like a large window like this, like a 5 foot by 5 foot by 5 foot window, that's a much larger light source than just a flash and a bulb. So that is a huge help. So I've got 5 feet of light from both sides, and I would say each umbrella, from the point of the umbrella to my clothes, is maybe about 2.5 feet away. So really, really tight and close for everything. Okay, so what I have set up on here, this is my flash 1. It is in the slave mode, and I've actually labeled it on here flash C. So slave mode. And for the flashes, I usually, you can set them on manual. I usually set them on ETTL, which stands for electronic through the lens. And what that does is it reads what the lens is reading and the lighting that the lens is seeing, and it will correctly adjust for the correct amount of light. And you can still turn it down or turn it up if necessary. Right now I just kind of have it as standard, as what the camera would see as standard. And that's what that middle hash mark is. Now this one, actually, it's set, this is flash B. This one is set 1 stop lower. So what this means is this flash will be a little bit less bright than the other flash. And the reason behind it is so that I do get, with the light I'm shaping my product, everything's correctly lit, but it is, it's correctly lit, but there's still some definition. It's not looking completely flat, like I've got a dress hung up against the wall, that there's, someone can imagine them being in it. All right, and then the last thing I have here is my receiver, or the transmitter. And so this sits on top of my camera. Like I said, it will work with any Canon. If you order these flashes, then you would make sure they are brand specific, so you would have to make sure you either get a Canon transmitter or the Nikon transmitter. So it sits on the top. I can control my flashes from here, but it has the same readout. So it says flash B is at 0 and flash C is at 0, and that will override what's set up there. So what I will do is, before I take a picture, I'm going to turn down flash C to 1 stop under, and it just timed out. It just went to sleep, so I just woke it up again. All right, so I'm going to turn it on over to my daughter and let her film. So I'm going to change flash C, turn it down. So I turned it down a stop, so that is there. I am going to change my ISO, take my ISO all the way. In the first video I talked about it. This kind of controls how much light you need. Because I'm using these flashes, the flashes are nice and bright. I can shoot in an ISO 100. And what that means is you have a very clean picture. There's little noise, what we call digital noise. If you've ever taken a picture with your cell phone at night and not use the flash and you kind of get all this speckly and it just doesn't look as sharp, it's because your camera is saying, oh, it's dark, I'm going to use a higher ISO, and it leaves these artifacts of what we call digital noise. So it's just not a crisp, clean looking picture. I'm also, because I'm going to have so much light coming out of these flashes, I know because of that, I am going to change my aperture. So that's the diaphragm inside the camera lens itself. I'm going to put it to f11. So it's a much smaller hole inside the camera. So everything's going to be sharp, front to back, completely sharp. And then the last thing I'm going to do is my shutter speed is at 1/125th. I'm actually going to turn that up to 1/160th, and this should be pretty good set here. I am going to push, let me see, just because I have that socket there, I am going to push this back just slightly, and I'm going to push my lamps forward, or my lights, strobes forward a little bit, or flashes forward, they're not strobes, just to keep the ratio about the same. And so everything's really tight. If you look, there's pretty much only 2 feet in between my umbrellas. I just shoot in between those and don't worry about, I don't see them in my lens. If I was using a much wider lens, then yes, I would probably worry about it a little bit more. So here is the picture. It's a little blue, so I'm going to change, instead of using the auto white balance, I am going to change that to flash so that it'll compensate. White balance. There we go. That's my flash setting. So that'll kind of compensate for the flash lights usually put out a lot more blue optically on the light spectrum. They're a much cooler light. So I did that. The other thing, looking at this initial picture, if you look, let me see if I can zoom it in. All right. If you look, there's some light graduation. It's much brighter up here versus down below. No, here in the picture. It's brighter up top than down below. So what that's told me is I need to drop my lights source a little bit lower. It looks like I've got too much light going over top of the product. So I'm going to drop them down and point them a little bit more at the belly button. And every time I do this, I usually have to adjust where the light is falling, especially since I'm always putting up and setting down. And depending on the product, like if I'm doing skirt, then I'm going to have to drop my lights lower than if I'm doing a top. So I just kind of move in between the two, shoot in between, and there we go. So I adjusted. The white balance on my camera to flash. If you see, it warmed up the background quite a bit in the other one. Let's see. And this one, it's much bluer. So if you look at this one, this was the first one I took. It's much bluer. And then this one that I took, it's much warmer. And that's truer to what my actual wall color is. Also, if you look at the white here on the mannequin itself, this one is more of a true white. This one's a little bit of a cooler white. So if you have white on your mannequin, that's a good way to help tell whether your colors are true. You always want to look at that, and you know, the more you do it, the more you'll be able to teach your eyes. Can you look at the picture, make sure you're on me, are correctly focused. So usually I do one like that, and then I personally go in one more and I do a close-up. I use Pick Tap Go to collage them, but I do physically move in for that second image, and that is it. Every once in a while I have problems with photographing. Dark colors are usually not the issue. The issues I will have are photographing light colors. It seems like mint seems to be one of the harder ones that I have to photograph. So let's see how this one works today. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. I think all of my super light mint ones I have sold. So this one might photograph just fine. I'm trying to think if I have a pair of leggings. I have a pair of leggings downstairs that I have a really hard time photographing. Yeah, so you're too close. So in a case like this, it's not quite as light as it's photographing, and I think what's happening is the fabric itself is reflecting the light. And what you can do is a couple things. I can manually just go through up top and turn down my flashes. So I turn down that one a stop, and I can turn down that one a stop, and let's see how the two of them look compared. Yeah. So let me see if I can. So this was the first one I took. This one's the second one I took. It looks still a little bit underexposed, but the color is getting better. It's just not as bright. So I'll go back to my lights, and what I will do is increase maybe 2 notches on one, and then three notches on the other, and let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's a little bit better. It's just one of those things I just have a really hard time. So this one's actually too dark. That one I feel like is too bright. This one's a little bit better, and there's a couple other tricks that I can do, but that's probably about as close as I can get. When I do the collage, if I need to, sometimes I'll just bump down the light on the collage, and then usually just walk in between the lights, take one last picture. Sometimes with me standing there, that's enough to block the light as well. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to show you. Oh, there were some questions with using the shoot through. I only have one of these right now. The other one's in my storage unit. So I'm going to slide this on this. And so it just slides over top the umbrella. And yep, I'm good. So so it just kind of goes over top the spokes here. And if you notice on the inside of this, it's a little reflective. When you shoot through, it doesn't affect, that reflectiveness doesn't affect it, but once you put, I guess it's kind of like a mirror, once you put the black behind it, it becomes super reflective, very similar to the way a mirror works. And so I will show you how you can use this as a reflective. And I'm going to use this one as, let me see, you're going to work with me. And I'm going to turn this flash off and just set it down and slide it back. So I'm going to do a one light setting. What I'm going to do is think of my window source as my second light, and then the flash is going to be my first light. So I'm going to pull this in closer now, because the light's going to be bouncing off of the inside of the umbrella all the way back to your product to illuminate. And then my second source is fill light. It's just going to come from the window. All right, and let's see how this looks. Let me take a picture first, and then I'm going to adjust from there as needed. All right, all right, so by just flipping it around, all my settings were exactly the same. Let me turn my camera this way. But you can see the huge difference that is in here. So I need to increase the power on the flash significantly, because the settings that it was at before is not enough to overcome. Part of that is because when you use the ETTL mode, see the little red area that's blinking here on the front? Nope, on the front here.
It's the wrong side. Okay,
so that is actually infrared technology, and because it's not facing the light, it's not facing the object I'm going to photograph, it's not reading correctly. So what I'm going to do is flip my umbrella around. Just step back. Okay, you can step back, honey. Okay. Around. And then I'm actually going to flip my flash head around. So it's like that, and that should help to some extent with the reading. But in a case like this, and this really shows why I prefer, I mean, you can do it, it just takes a lot more flash to make a reflective umbrella to work, because all the power is hitting this and then coming out, versus, so you're losing a lot of your light energy by having it go all the way to this distance and then all the way back, versus shooting through the light, you're just shooting from this point out versus this point to this point to this point. So hence why a lot of you who are flipping your lights around, why product is not bright enough. So I'm having it angled. Like I said, these are really, really cheap mounts. So you kind of sometimes get what you pay for. So same thing, have not changed any of my camera settings. Still quite dark on this one, but It's filling in a lot more. So what I'm going to do is, this is flash C. I'm going to increase this to a +1 for my flash. The first picture is probably not going to be correct. I'm going to take 2 because it needs to communicate it twice since I just made changes. Still was there. That light next to us is just not enough to help balance out and not hide those shadows. I'm going to try sliding everything toward this light source here. And I'm going to slide this in closer, like about as close as I can get it. And then I'm going to literally just shoot around that umbrella. Yep, still not enough. That's why you kind of need 2 light sources. So it fills in that that left-hand side. It's just not bright enough. If you also look, I'm going to flip the other flash here because you're saying, well, to have, okay. So we had some technical difficulties. The tape failed. I had to delete some stuff off my phone. So I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to move this flash out of the way. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not moving anything. I'm going to put this flash in as a shoot through. Close to my light source, turn it on, and camera settings are going to be the same, and I want to see how different it looks. As a 1 shoot through umbrella and natural light coming in from the other side as your fill light. Yep, so still just isn't enough to fill, still just isn't enough to fill both sides. I mean, there's a couple ways I could get around it. I could bump up that ISO and then turn down my flash and make this the main source of light, and then make this my fill light. So I'm going to turn my ISO up to 2500, and I'm going to drop my f-stop, my aperture, down to 3.5. I drop my shutter speed down to 1/250th. And which flash is this? This is C. This is C. And so I'm going to drop this down to just normal reading. So I zeroed it out again. So it's.
But it's on again. Oh, wait, no, I didn't.
All right. So the first one I took was overexposed. Second one I took, still kind of bright. Third one looks good, but if you notice, by doing the fill light, using the natural light outside and then the flash, Grace, here, the picture, the background, my wall is a completely different color. And if you look at my mannequin, it's not really white. It kind of has a pinkish hue to it. So that's another plus of kind of blocking out all the natural light and setting your, using it by your flash. You're controlling your light temperature. You're not, the light outside isn't going to control your light temperature. Because as you go through the day, the temperature of the light on the light scale is going to change. So early morning, when the sun first rises, it's a very warm light, very yellow, golden colored. Noon, it's going to be a little bit more blue. and then as it sets, it's going to go down, or it's going to warm up again, and that has to do with the latitude and the angle to the sun. So if a lot of you have done photo sessions, your photographers you'll hear them talk about the golden hour. So it's when the hour around sunrise and the hour around sunset. So that the light temperature is going to shift throughout the day. So when you use strobes like this, you are consistent. You know exactly what your color temperature. You're taking control of the situation, and you can manipulate the situation to make your meet your needs, versus being at the whims of the weather gods and you were having to work around them. So that's probably the biggest plus for everything. I'm trying to think what else I want to do. So I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to stop recording, and then I'm going to pull everything up on the camera, from the camera on up to the computer, and let you see what they look like on the computer.